Good evening. I am sorry to break into these wonderful warm conversations on this chilly evening. Welcome to everyone who's been able to come along and join us in person tonight. It's so wonderful to see you all. I was just saying I still get so excited when we're able to have in-person events, and may that ever remain the case. But a very warm welcome to many people, friends and colleagues joining us online. My name's Mary Keys and I'm the Director of the Law Futures Research Centre here at Griffith University, and it's our wonderful pleasure and privilege to join with you this evening in launching Kate's latest book. So exciting. I meant to say a particular welcome to Kate's family. It's so good to see you all out indoors. Because I think that's really what Kate's research is about, family, and I know how much you all mean to her, and it's just I think the friendship and the love that you all have for each other really grounds Kate, and it makes her into such a wonderful friend and colleague, academic and practitioner. So we're all just very blessed to have you here tonight, and thank you. We really appreciate you coming out. Down now. We're serious. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands on which we're meeting tonight, and to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and to extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. So we have just an amazing lineup of speakers tonight, such an impressive program that really will demonstrate to you, if you're in any doubt about it, about the importance of Kate's work from a practical perspective and from an academic perspective as well, and just the esteem in which her work is held internationally and locally at every single possible level at which her work could touch people's hearts and minds. You're going to hear about that tonight. And I guess that's what we're all striving to achieve, right, is work and research that has a purpose and that really does transform lives. And that's what Kate's work really, sorry, Kate. That's what her work exemplifies, and she's just such an inspiration to all of us who have the chance to know her and work with her. So bless you, Kate. So of course at the Law Futures Centre, that's the style of research and the type of research that we seek to encourage and promote, and that's why it's so lovely to have the chance. Sure, most of you know exactly what it takes to produce a book. It's such a labour of love. It's so much work, and it's just impressive when books come out, but particularly a book of this quality and character that has the opportunity not only to change the academic debate internationally, but just to have such a profound impact on the lives of children, millions of children around the world whose lives will be affected by the publication of this work, Kate. We're just very proud of you and the work that you do, and we're very pleased to call you our friend and colleague. So as I say, I don't want to take up too much time because we do have all these amazing speakers, and we're so grateful to them all for giving up their time here and online internationally from all around the world. So our first speaker is not able to join with us in person because she's not been well, and she sends her apologies for not being here, but it's the Senator from Western Australia, Senator Linda Reynolds, who was elected to the Australian Senate in 2014, and as you know, she represents Western Australia. She was, amongst many other things, the co-sponsor of the Australian Modern Slavery Act in 2018, and she's worked with Kate over many years, including in the development and the introduction of that legislation in Australia. So she's been instrumental in working to achieve policy and legislative outcomes related to orphanage trafficking and orphanage tourism in Australia.
Thank you and hello. It is my great honour to virtually join you today for the launch of this most important book, Orphanage Trafficking in International Law, written by Dr. Kate Van Doore. I've been so proud to work with Dr. Van Doore on this issue, and I greatly admire her global leadership in identifying and tackling this most heinous of 21st century crime. This book is a worthy and a very important addition to the 2020 book, Modern Day Slavery and Orphanage Tourism. That book, for the first time, comprehensively informed and educated the world on the very real issue of paper orphans and of orphanage trafficking. As we know only too well today, slavery does not recognise international borders. In fact, it exploits them. The global nature of modern slavery demands a global response. And this is why this new book is such an important next step, as it is the very first comprehensive research on the issue from a purely legal perspective. Until now, orphanage trafficking was anecdotally referred to as trafficking without legal foundation. I believe in this work, Dr. Van Doore has convincingly demonstrated that the two tests, the act and the purpose, can be met to categorise orphanage trafficking as a form of child trafficking under international law. The battle for freedom is not a new pursuit. In fact, it is as old as humanity is itself. We all share a belief that no child or adult should ever be subject to exploitation and to abuse. But the truth is, the sad truth, is that there will always be people amongst us who will seek to exploit others for profit. Together, we have created this very modern form of child exploitation, and it is absolutely our responsibility to end it. With this book, we are now an important step further in combating the very crime we have contributed to creating. That is the trafficking and the exploitation of vulnerable children through orphanage trafficking. So congratulations once again, Dr. Van Doore.
Obviously, we're very grateful to Senator Reynolds for taking time to record those comments. So our next speaker is the true star of the show. I'm so proud and pleased to introduce my wonderful friend and colleague, Dr. Kate Van Doore. I'm sure she needs no introduction, but just wait. Just wait. I'm introducing her anyway. She's an international children's rights lawyer and the Deputy Head of School of Learning and Teaching at Griffith Law School. She's internationally recognised for her expertise in orphanage trafficking in particular. She researches the intersections of children's rights, institutionalisation and human trafficking, and she's been invited to present many international keynote addresses on those issues. She works closely with governments in Australia and abroad and many companies internationally and in Australia on their approaches and responses to orphanage trafficking and modern slavery. Her expertise has been recognised in many ways, including her appointment to many national and international advisory boards and committees, where she provides expert advice on issues relating to trafficking and modern slavery. Amongst her many other accomplishments, and academic publications, in 2022, her second book, Orphanage Trafficking in International Law, which you see here before you, was published by Cambridge University Press, and I'm sure I don't need to tell you that's an enormously impressive achievement. So we're here obviously to celebrate the publication of this book. So please give it up for Dr. Kate.
I wrote a speech right before this, so I'm going to pretend I'm going to use it. And I'm just going to check something. Okay. Thanks, Mary, for that very long introduction, which I think, did I write some of it? But you've added to it. Absolutely. But thank you for organising this tonight, and thank you for everything. Mary was my PhD supervisor, so, you know, this book is her fault, really. And I want to just start by extending my respects also to the First Nations people of this land that we're on, the Turrbal and Yagara people. And just when I was thinking about preparing for tonight, notwithstanding that I wrote my speech directly before this, but I did reflect upon the commonalities between some of the family separation that our First Nations people have experienced over the last 200 or so years, and the situation that many of the children that I'm writing about experience. And, you know, the ongoing legacy of that family separation and living with that. And so I thought that was worth acknowledging and talking about. So this book begins with the words, sometimes life takes an unexpected turn and you end up in a situation that you didn't ever think you'd be. And so is the story of this research. And so I can't find the speech, sorry, I'm just going to have to put it away. I've got the run sheet, I've got some other thing I've written. I'm just trying to hear it in your so that's how this book starts, and it's a bit of an unusual start for an academic book, I admit, but I never expected to write a book, let alone an academic book, and I certainly didn't realise I'd ever think I'd be standing here, you know, at a book launch for that book that I wrote, which was unexpected. You all know me well. I think there's a couple of faces I don't recognise. So you know the story of how I arrived here. You know that in 2006 I was part of founding an orphanage, and then later we discovered that the children in that orphanage were not orphans. And the reality of that discovery, I suppose, was that some very practical implications of how do we find the families of these children, but also for me, sparked more of a legal curiosity about what's the legal situation of these children, what exactly has happened to these children. You know, it can't be kidnapping because their parents have consented. It seems like it's more than fraud. It seems like it's maybe more than what orphanage directors are being charged with currently, which is child abuse or neglect or something along those lines, and walking away after 2 or 3 years. And that's where the trafficking argument came from. So what the book /PhD / the last however many years of my life has been looking at is really establishing how that process works, how children are recruited. And so that process is often a recruiter moving through a village, offering a better chance at life for children, offering the chance for an education for children, and parents being convinced that this is a fantastic opportunity for their child, sending their child off with that recruiter, who then will, go down, usually, I'm saying down because I'm thinking Nepal, which is mountainous, but often into the capital cities where orphanages proliferate. And that child may have false identification documents created, and the child, it becomes what we term a paper orphan, which is what Linda Reynolds was referring to. And from there, the child is then touted, if you like, on the market for foreign sponsorship, for people to come and volunteer with, and to garner money. And the more pitiful the state the child is left in, the more money that child can garner. So you can imagine some of these children are raised in very pitiful states. So that problem sparked that legal curiosity. And then thanks to academia, I had to do a PhD. Don't mind that, that's my daughter. I had to do a PhD, and this seemed like a good topic to do it on looking at whether this could be a form of international child trafficking, under international law, sorry. So this book actually sets out the process of orphanage trafficking. It sets out provides a legal framework for practical implementation for governments to take, not just for countries that experience orphanage trafficking, and we're talking about countries across South Asia, Southeast Asia, the African continent, the Caribbean, like we're talking about low and middle income countries all over the place really, but also for countries like Australia who inadvertently contribute to that problem by funding orphanages, by sending volunteers, thinking that we're doing the right thing and we're doing a very generous thing. When in actual fact, we know from a very long history of research on institutional care of children how harmful it is. And we know that in our own country, which is why we don't have large-scale institutional care here anymore. But for some reason, we've suspended that knowledge in the form of cognitive dissonance when we consider children overseas. So this research provides the practical framework, but is also a bit of a hearts and minds journey, as Mary was saying, to try and educate people on the ills of child institutionalisation, that it's not a great option. So in that vein, I just have a short video that I want to show. It gives me a break, gives you a break from me talking as well, of one of the children that we had initially in our orphanage in Nepal, who's now a young woman. Her name's Athena, and she's a very proud moment for me. She's a law student. And I asked her just to reflect on what the impact of that institutionalisation has been on her life as she's grown up. She's now been at home with family since 2014. But the ongoing impact of the 8 years that she spent in the orphanage, speaks for itself. So we're just going to play the video and then I've got a little bit more to say.
Namaste, I'm Zafina Yunjan. I'm a law student and I'm in my 3rd year of bachelor's. Yes, there is orphanage trafficking because I'm standing here, right here, as the living evidence. The list goes on if I try listing the harmful effect it has on children. This video might not be enough. But what I regret the most of being separated from my family is that I missed my whole childhood. Now I'm in my early 20s and I still don't know a thing about my culture and language. It is really hard to try to learn a new language at my age. Obviously, it isn't impossible, but it is hard. Plus, I still struggle to bond emotionally with my family. It's like we never have taken the next step forward as a family. So, I hope for a future where every child has a home and every child belongs to a family. It's idealistic, but a hope can never be wrong. This research by Dr. Kate is an empowerment for orphanage trafficking survivors to advocate and aware our government, families and communities. I'm sure this research will help guide our government and legal authorities to bring laws regarding orphanage trafficking and to prosecute the criminals for their wrongdoing. Such laws will help stop the growing business of orphanage trafficking and retrieve the lost identities of many means. Dhanyavad.
I think that speaks for itself. Now I'm going to cry. So, no, I'm not going to get it together. But I want to end with my thank yous because there's so many. Now, don't you cry. I have a magnificent team and, where to start? So, let's start with the front row and then I'll work my way backwards. Of course, the Rethink Orphanages crew have been amazing. So we've worked together over the last 7 years, can you believe it? Rebecca's here tonight and I owe a huge vote of thanks to Beck. We've worked just so prolifically together and continue to do so. And the rest of the team, Andy's here tonight too, which I'll thank her in a separate capacity. And Lee, Tara, Liz and Karen, who've just been a real powerhouse, and it's just been such a privilege to work with everyone in that policy and legislative space. The speakers tonight, of course, Senator Linda Reynolds, who unfortunately has COVID for the 2nd time, so couldn't be here, but she's been fantastic. Professor Parosha Chandran, who you're about to hear from, Professor Jen Burns, like a legend in the Australian human trafficking circles, possibly Dr. Anne Gallagher, we're not sure, we're trying to get a link to her to maybe join, and Zafina, who just, to have such beautiful speakers is just such a wonderful thing. And of course, the Law Future Centre, Mary and Mel, and the law school crew, some of which are here tonight, and particularly Mary and Therese. I think you both just display such exemplary leadership that we can only all aspire to. And it's such a privilege to work with you both. Who else? My family right in front of me. It's, doing a PhD and writing a book, it takes a lot of physical time, but it also takes a lot of head space. And you've all been so generous to me in providing that, particularly you, Andy. And it's been a journey for you as well, I know, and you should probably have doctors beside all of your names too. And finally, I just want to say that the book, is dedicated to 20 brave Nepali girls who, I think I said, they've spoke their truth and found their freedom. But what has been amazing for me the last few years is to watch them develop as leaders and to lead in this space. And their voices are so important for us to learn from as we move forward in developing policy and legislation from both sides, all countries, to try and combat this issue. And those 20 girls now speak, you know, for the 5.5 million other children that are growing up in orphanages currently and to go home to. So that's what it's about. I'm here. I didn't expect to be here, but here I am doing some of this work, and I've just been so grateful for all the help along the way. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Kate. That was just typically beautiful and moving, and how wonderful to hear from Zafina, and how like you to give people like Zafina a voice. It's really impressive and important part of your work. So our next speaker will be joining us online due to magic technology. And the next speaker, as Kate mentioned, is Professor Parosha Chandran. She's joining us this evening, or it's this evening our time, it's just after breakfast her time, so we're really grateful to her for joining us. She's a Professor of Practice in Modern Slavery Law at the Dixon Poon School of Law at King's College in London. She's a human rights barrister, a specialist in modern slavery law, and a world-leading expert on the law relating to human trafficking for the United Nations, the Council of Europe. She's I've said that already. She represents adult and child victims of modern slavery and human trafficking, and has set critical legal trafficking precedents in the asylum, slavery, criminal non-punishment, civil and public law contexts. So please join me in welcoming all the way from London, Professor Parosha Chandran. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can you see me? I think am I a thumbprint? It's the first time I've been a thumbprint, actually.
We can see.
Thank you. Well, it's my true delight to be here today, and I'm sorry I can't join you in person. I pay my respects to the custodians of the land in Australia, and it's really my absolute delight to have been invited to speak to follow my distinguished colleague Kate Van Doore in her keynote speech on the launch of her book, Orphanage, Trafficking in International Law. I'm going to present some of the summaries of the findings in Kate's book, and it's really quite daunting an area, and yet one that she has been able to exercise remarkable leadership in. There are between 2.7 and 8 million children living in orphanages or residential care institutions globally. It's estimated that at least 4 out of 5 of these children are not orphans, having one or both parents alive who could care for them with support. In some situations, poverty-stricken families are coerced into giving up their children to unscrupulous institutions which aim to profit from the residence of the children there, a process known and termed by Kate globally as orphanage trafficking. She defines this as the recruitment or transfer of a child into an orphanage or residential care institution for the purpose of exploitation and profit. This usually begins with the recruitment or transfer of a child from their family into an orphanage predicated on fraudulent promises, usually entering the child into formal education. The child's then transferred into an orphanage and may have new identity documents forged, including a new birth certificate or death certificates of parents, which formalise their status as orphans. They're known as paper orphans, and they're orphans only by virtue of the fraudulent paperwork or documentation. Such children are then held in orphanages used to attract foreign aid and orphanage tourism. This process has been identified in a number of countries by Kate: Nepal, Cambodia, Ghana, Uganda, Guatemala, Haiti, Kenya, and many other countries. Kate's book establishes that orphanage trafficking is a form of child trafficking under international law and presents the first comprehensive research on the issue. Her book offers scholars and academics a thorough analysis of this type of child trafficking, which has not been previously investigated in the level of detail and leadership and skill that she has been able to apply. It represents a significant development, not only in the academic field of trafficking, by detailing this as a form of trafficking, of child trafficking, but also gives pointers towards policymakers, lawyers, civil society, and all those who are devoting their lives to helping combat child trafficking in all of its forms. What I'd like to mention is that I've been working in this field as well for a couple of years, inspired by the work of Kate. The Commonwealth Parliamentary Association in the United Kingdom presented some of Kate's findings to me a few years ago, and they themselves set up a conference to invite Kate to speak so that she could explain her findings to an international audience of the Commonwealth. Following that, Lumos, the Children's Rights Foundation in England, commissioned me to write a model law against orphanage trafficking, which I was able to complete at the end of last year and was published in December 2021. So my work was entirely inspired by Kate's work. And from a legal practitioner's perspective, having practiced this year 25 years at the Bar of England and Wales, I set about trying to create some model laws that could assist states when faced with this type of phenomenon to implement amendments to their domestic laws in order to thoroughly enable the investigation, prosecution, conviction, sentence of perpetrators, and in so doing to protect children. One of the key points I'd like to just mention today, because it's so important and follows what Kate has said about the harm done to children, are my suggestions for aggravated offences. What has become crystal clear is that children are harmed in a multitude of very severe ways during their experience as having been victims of child trafficking for orphanage trafficking. For example, they're instructed to tell others that they're orphans, such as volunteers or funders. They're told that their family has died. Their name may be changed formally or informally. The child may be then denied access to their parents. We've seen cases where children are taken into orphanages by parents who don't suspect criminality by those who are recruiting them or harbouring them there. And when the parents go to those orphanages to see their children, their beloved offspring, they're denied contact and any communication. Can you imagine how that feels for a child? Children in these orphanages are denied access, in many cases, to adequate food, sleeping arrangements, clean water, sanitation, medical care or education. They may be subject to conditions hazardous to their physical or mental health or emotional well-being. Whilst in the orphanage, they then may be trafficked out of the orphanage for other forms of exploitation, sexual exploitation, forced labour. Children have been seen to be forced into construction sites to work or into townships for begging and then rounded up and brought back. What about children who are then forced to perform in shows or performances, singing, dancing, playing, acting, in order to attract donations or funding from the orphanage? When these children were victims of trafficking and they're forced to perform in such shows, can you imagine the type of trauma and harm and suffering they undergo behind those smiles. In some cases, children are often confined to orphanages by the use of threats, force, coercion, physical control or circumstances. And in some cases, let's not forget where there are volunteers who often unwittingly go seeking to help these children. The children who are denied access to any other form of love, form attachment disorders, attachment dependencies on those volunteers who are there only temporarily and who then leave, leaving the children deprived and bereft of that love that was so temporarily given. This offence of child trafficking is one that is done to deliberately harm children in order to maximise profits. I want to commend Kate Van Doore for her leadership, for her skilled legal research work, and above all, for her guiding light and her heart. The voices of vulnerable children recruited and harboured for orphanage trafficking and their right to be protected have had a voice in her, now have a voice in her book, and now have a voice in you. Thank you, Kate Van Doore. It's a privilege to be here today.
Well, hello. My name is Therese Wilson. I'm the Dean of Law at Griffith Law School. I'd like to echo Mary's words when I say how absolutely delighted and fortunate we are that we have a colleague such as Dr. Kate Van Doore, not just as a member of the Law Future Centre, but also as a colleague in the law school. In addition to doing these amazing things with her research and having such an incredible and important impact, she also practically runs the school, at least all of the learning and teaching in the school. So it's really quite extraordinary when you think of Kate's achievements in that context. I also would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we are having this lovely meeting, the Jagera and Turrbal peoples, and pay respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people as well. I have the very pleasant task, thanks to Mary's invitation, to thank Professor Parosha Chandran for those wonderful words and also to introduce our next speaker. And I think what really stood out for me in Professor Chandran's address was this incredible impact of Kate's work. So Professor Chandran was able to talk about the fact that it's Kate who coined this term, orphanage trafficking. It's Kate who identified through her research all of the countries in which this is happening and was able to describe the process in sufficient detail for us all to understand it, to understand what's actually happening when we donate or volunteer at these orphanages. And I think the fact that it's Kate's work that has had this recognised as an offence that can then hopefully be appropriately punished and also hopefully eradicated. And it was fascinating to hear of Professor Chandran's work too in drafting the model law. And again, the fact that this incredibly important work that Professor Chandra has undertaken was informed by Kate's research. So if you could all join with me, please, in thanking Professor Chandra so much. And now it is my very great pleasure to introduce Professor Jennifer Byrne. Jennifer Byrne is a professor and the director of Anti-Slavery Australia. Jennifer has led the development of Australian best practice anti-slavery initiatives since 2003. Through her research, advocacy and practice, she has pursued legislative amendments and policy developments to promote best practice responses for the prevention of modern slavery and to ensure survivors of modern slavery have access to the protection and support they need. Jennifer is nationally renowned as a thought leader in the field of human trafficking, slavery and slavery-like practices, particularly for her work on the prevention of all forms of modern slavery and victim support. Please join me in welcoming Professor.
Thank you very much, Therese. You know, I've just picked up Kate's book. Do you think this could, I don't know whether you're going to notice it later, Kate, but I've marked it carefully. I'd also like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we're meeting tonight and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I'd also like to acknowledge all of you, Kate's family, Kate's friends and colleagues, of course the Dean, Therese Wilson, Mary Keys. You're a remarkable group of people, and I've just been overwhelmed by the warmth that you hold for each other, and particularly, of course, for Kate, in recognition of this extraordinary book that she's written. I'm honoured to be here tonight. I'm honoured to have been invited to join you in launching this book tonight, and of course delighted to be here with Professor Chandran and Dr. Anne Gallagher, who's online, and Senator Reynolds, of course, started us off tonight. Kate's given me a guide about what I should speak about. For the reasons that you've heard tonight, but for another reason as well, and that is that Kate has taken a very technical definition of trafficking that is in a UN protocol, the Trafficking Protocol, and you're going to hear from Dr. Gallagher very soon, and Dr. Gallagher was influential in the crafting of that protocol. But for many years, there was controversy about whether or not orphanage trafficking was a unique form of trafficking or a form of child trafficking. And what Kate's done is to show, you know, through really solid academic research, that orphanage trafficking is a unique, discrete form of exploitation that fits within the trafficking definition, but which is correctly known as orphanage trafficking. That is a remarkable achievement. So now I can come to the bit that she asked me to speak about, which was, and I'm not even sure whether this is going to interest you, but it's a very brief statement about the work of Anti-Slavery Australia, and then a quick few sentences about the Australian response to trafficking and slavery, and then a note about some emerging challenges. And then I'm very pleased to be able to join with Kate in some future work, so I'll speak about that too. Is that okay? So, Anti-Slavery Australia is a pretty unusual organisation. We are part of the University of Technology, Sydney, part of the law school there. We do run a legal service as part of Anti-Slavery Australia. And in the same way that Kate referred to people and children that she's known, and we saw the film of Alicia, I can also say to you that in my role at Anti-Slavery Australia, I have met thousands. That is a true number, there's no exaggeration there. Thousands of people who have been trafficked to Australia and enslaved in Australia. And we've been able to use our skills as lawyers to provide access to justice. But these are children, women, men, trafficked to Australia and exploited in Australia in a form of such terrible exploitation that it is slavery or servitude or forced labour, or one of the other forms of modern slavery that we now use to describe this whole bundle of terrible crimes. But I have been able to witnessed the Australian response to trafficking and slavery from the very beginning. Anne might speak about the trafficking protocol, which was really finalised in about 2002. And then from 2003 at Anti-Slavery Australia, we started to respond to trafficking and slavery by representing people, but also taking part in the national debate. So in that way, I can say through direct experience that I've seen all the legislative reforms in this space from the very beginning. So whether there were visas created to give people who needed a visa certainty in visa protection, or whether new laws were created, forced marriage and forced labour, for instance, or whether the Modern Slavery Act was established. So I've seen all those developments. I've also seen Australia establish a national police force run out of the AFP, responsible for investigating all these Commonwealth crimes. We do have a support program that the government funds that provides support for trafficked people. And we do have frameworks to encourage networks and cooperation between civil society and government. And of course, we have a national action plan. And I'm going to come back to that later at the end. But there are a couple of challenges, really big challenges on the horizon. So in addition to the ones that Kate's mentioned, I'll just throw in a few more, and there are intersections. So I saw those in the book, Kate. So one of the intersections is in this area of compensation. So we want to establish a mechanism for survivors of orphanage trafficking or of modern slavery to be able to access an effective compensation scheme. And we're a long way from that so far. We in Australia need to improve the way that we support people who have been trafficked or enslaved here. And we need to focus more on prevention of these practices, because honestly, the human impact of being trafficked or enslaved is catastrophic. And you've heard about that already, and undoubtedly you know that. But the consequences of slavery and trafficking can be lifelong trauma and terror, and sometimes even death. So, Kate, I'm going to come back to Kate now and say that in 2017, she received an Anti-Slavery Australia Freedom Award for her outstanding research and advocacy. And it was in that same year that the Australian Parliament recognised the work that she'd done. And you can see that in the parliamentary report, which is called Hidden in Plain Sight. Anne Gallagher has urged Kate to be a visionary, but also to be in this for the long haul. So welcome, Kate. Welcome to the long haul. She's brave and she's courageous, and you can see that through the book. She's using not only terms like orphanage trafficking, but orphanage addiction and the orphan industrial complex. She's speaking about corruption. She's speaking about the benefit to the state of establishing orphanages in state. To tackle these big issues requires bravery and courage, and Kate's demonstrated that she's got that. There are intersections with some work that we have ongoing. How am I going for time? Am I all right?
I've got about a minute.
A minute? Okay, we've got a really important project that's coming up. It's called Seeking Freedom, and Kate's agreed to be on the steering committee for that project. And this project will establish a child rights framework in Australia. And the intention of that is that we'll be able to increase the identification of children subject to trafficking and slavery in Australia, and importantly, increase their participation in decision making that affects them. Now, I just want to finish with one quote from Kate's book. And this is what Kate wrote, and she wrote about a girl. Well, this is Alicia, and we saw her on the film. Yeah, different one. Okay, well, she said that you belong with your family, and then in your grandmother's words, When Chitkin was returned to us, it was if gold was laid at our feet. And that's been a constant reminder of why Kate is doing the work that she's done. And she says that she's so proud of the woman, she's speaking now to Alicia, that you've become. And this book was written because of you and for you. So I think that you already know Kate, you're all family and friends and colleagues, but this is a commendable book. It's changed the international law landscape, and I'm very, very pleased to be part of the launch tonight. Congratulations, Kate.
Thank you so much, Jennifer, and particularly for helping us situate Kate's very important and impactful work in a broader context. And it makes us excited for where the next step is in terms of dealing with slavery and trafficking, including in this country, which it's quite disturbing to hear about. But yes, I think there's a very exciting few book launches to come out of Kate. So. And would you mind logging up? Sorry, having some trouble. So Dr. Anne Gallagher will hopefully be speaking next. And I've been hearing of Dr. Anne Gallagher for many years from Kate. I think Kate regards her as one of her mentors, someone who she's admired for a long time and enjoyed her support for a very long time as well. So she's played a very important role in Kate's research, alongside fabulous people like Professor Mary Keyes, who obviously was her PhD supervisor as well. So it's wonderful that against all odds and technology, Dr. Gallagher is trying her very best to join us, but has had some difficulties. I'll introduce her, and I hope by the end of the introduction that she might be there, but Mel's not looking confident. So, are you there, Dr. Gallagher?
Sorry, she's just left and she's going to be coming in any second. There you go, you talk.
So Dr. Anne Gallagher is the Director General of the Commonwealth Foundation. She's an Australian-born lawyer, practitioner and scholar. She's considered to be an international authority on transnational criminal law, migration and human rights, and she's the leading global expert on the international law on human trafficking. So obviously a very appropriate person to come and speak to Kate's book.
Hi, everybody. Gosh, so I'm absolutely thrilled to be joining you all to celebrate the launch of Kate's book. I'd originally proposed to do a pre-record as I'm actually on holidays in southern Italy, but sometimes technical difficulties, which my team encountered yesterday, can be a blessing. So it's really a pleasure and a privilege to be joining you in person today. And I hope you can hear me. Can I get some kind of...
Yes.
Okay. So you might already have guessed that I'm a massive fan. Kate was brave and visionary in deciding to take on an especially difficult and politicised area of international law and policy. Now, in preparing my very brief contribution, I went back to Kate's presentation at her PhD confirmation. This was my first introduction to Kate and her work, and I really have to just take a second to thank Mary for being the person who brought us together. I remember being so impressed by how clearly Kate explained what she was seeing and what she wanted to find out. My own journey into the international law of human trafficking has been a very long one. As Jennifer mentioned, I was fortunate enough to be part of shaping the international legal definition of trafficking and articulating the basic obligations that states owed to each other and to those who were being exploited for private profit. But I think we knew very well back then, and that was 2000, the year 2000, that this was just the beginning. the next step was in the hands of people like Kate, careful and dedicated legal scholars and practitioners who took what we'd done and made it real, made it relevant for our world. So my current work is now in international diplomacy. So I've stepped aside from human trafficking, which in some ways is a relief, but it's a special relief because I know that the future is in the hands of such dedicated and competent people as Kate. So the book that's being launched today is a fitting testament to a great idea, brilliantly executed. There's so much to commend, and it's been lovely to hear what other people have been saying. First and foremost, I think the book is an excellent expose of the problem, a problem that was in front of us for so long before being recognised. But for me, its real strength lies in the focus of what needs to be done, not just by countries where children are exploited through orphanages, but also by those who often inadvertently are contributing to that exploitation. I feel very strongly, this is a thread through all of my work, that identifying legal responsibility is a critical step in righting so many wrongs, including this one. Kate, you've made a significant and important contribution to that. Congratulations. I feel very proud to count you as a friend and a colleague. Well done. Thank you, everyone.
To really highlight once again for us the very important impact of Kate's work and the fact that she is now the safe pair of hands in which this work rests. No pressure, but thank you, Dr. Gallagher, for those generous and fitting words. And now nothing remains to be done but for me to thank a few people and invite us all. I don't know if will it be cold out there, but the plan is to go out there and drink and eat. So, but we might want to come bring it inside and shut the door depending on the weather. But look, thanks to everybody for coming. As Mary said at the beginning, Kate's family, the wonderful Andy, the beautiful girls in Nook and Saskia. You know, Kate would not have been able to do any of this without you and without her family, and the support that we know that you've given her. So thank you. And also Andy's, I don't know if you all know, but Andy's very important work in Forget Me Not, which is actually at the heart of all of this as well. So thank you for everything that you do and continue to do for the people that we're talking about tonight. Who, and I agree with Mary, it's so important that the subjects of our research, you know, are given a voice, and that this is not just about numbers or statistics. This is about people, and they're the people that Andy works every day to help. So thank you, Andy. Thank you, obviously, to all of Kate's family, her wonderful parents and aunts and uncles. Thank you to all of Kate's colleagues and friends who are here, and I can see students as well, which is a great testament to Kate's impact and influence. I have to say, at orientation days and open days, we often say, because, you know, you say, why do you want to study law? Oh, I want to be a human rights lawyer. Oh, you should talk to Kate Van Doore, and they're all very excited. Kate always has a line of students wanting to meet her after orientation, which is just delightful. Obviously, we need to thank the fabulous Professor Mary Keys, who is the Director of the Law Futures Centre and provides amazing support for researchers in the centre, such as Kate, to ensure that they have the time and the space and the resources to undertake research, and who is responsible for organising this fabulous event. So please join with me in course, the fabulous Mel Davies, who's been managing the technology and doing her best. who is the manager of the Law Future Centre, and so put this whole event together for us. So Mel just does a terrific job, and we'd be completely lost without us. So thank you, Mel, very much for your efforts. So I think that actually concludes the evening, the formal parts of the evening, but please do stay on, brave the cold. It is a lovely veranda. And there are drinks and canopies to be had outside. So thanks very much, everybody.